Hello and welcome to my thesis. Thank you all for taking the time to join me today. I'm here to discuss with you my thesis plans and the idea of telling a story with a lens. Before I dive into my practice and project details, let me explain the project in a more broad sense. Telling a story with a lens is a 1-minute stop motion, conveying through visual metaphors vacant of human depiction the human experience of avoiding and confronting decisions. I'd like to start this presentation by explaining a bit of my general photography practice. So who am I? To start with, I'm a photography major and practitioner. I love working digitally for ease of workflow and analog for the enjoyment of its tactile process. Since I was 9 years old with a Polaroid camera, light and the ways in which it can be manipulated have always attracted me. Over the past near 3 years, I've been assisting with photo shoots at a local commercial photo studio in town, Polera. During my time with the studio, I've tried to absorb as much practical lighting, styling, and camera angle approach as possible. But above all else, and in both my personal and commercial practice, I'm driven by curiosity to learn new skills, ones I might be able to incorporate into my future projects, to learn new visual possibilities, as well as increase workflow efficiency. Last semester's curiosity led me to a lot of time spent exploring pinhole photography. I love the challenge of it, the hands-on nature, and the limited control of the final visual product. While fun, the research lacked an end goal greater than increasing my general understanding and ease of operating pinhole setups. Transitioning into this semester, I allowed myself to contemplate other research rabbit holes, ones I could pursue with more concrete end goals while having greater potential use in post-thesis commercial applications. This led me to stop motion, something I was introduced to at a young age with Legos by my friend Quinn. At the time, Quinn's father worked at Leica in the special effects department. The magic of seeing inanimate objects spring to life on screen is still as remarkable to me today as it was back when Quinn showed me the basics in elementary school. Growing up, my mom always pushed me to pursue creative concepts. She loved to see me attempt to depict ideas that sprang forth from my own brain. Having lost my mom almost a year ago, a large driving force in my thesis is her. I know she would love the commercial photography I've been practicing, but I also know she would love even more me bringing to life a story of my own devising. So this one definitely goes out to her. What is the stop motion concept I'm here to tell you about? I'm working towards producing a single 1-minute stop motion short film. The thematic goal of my film will be using objects to create visual metaphors representing the human experience of avoiding and confronting choices in life. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but this project is driven massively by technical pursuits. It is a visual exploration and convergence of several mediums I've worked on separately, but never unified it into a single project together. The film is intended to convey notions of avoidance, confrontation, misinterpretation, and decision-making. I've chosen to portray this through a traveling car that turns back the way it came once presented with a crossroads, then facing a repeating desert and an antagonizing car chasing it. Eventually, it is chased back to the crossroads from the film's beginning sequence, at which point it commits to moving forward and choosing a path, rather than turning back again. So why cars? Cars are significant to me because they have always offered me a safe place to escape from daily struggles, a place to put energy into and see results, and in some contexts, a tool to prove skill. I was constantly playing with toy cars when I was little. In fact, the chasing car in the test film I'll show you here momentarily was my favorite toy when I was about 3 years old. Because it was a police car, for whatever childish reason, I called it my Pita. I've always had a desire to bring toys to life and depict them as having a mind of their own, so I jumped at the chance of using my childhood toy in the test film I did. In this film, I will not be making an argument for or against fossil fuels. I'll be using cars for their near universally recognizable denotative symbolism as tools of transportation to help me in emphasizing my theme of human journey in this film. I'm going to show you a test film I worked a bit on towards the beginning of the semester, just to kind of get some of my ideas out there. For my test film, I tried to focus on the lighting and motion capture rather than prioritizing hyper-detailed set design. I started this during winter break and wrapped up a few weeks into this term when I was encouraged by my focus instructor, or my thesis instructor, to look into other aspects of the project and not put as much time on test film, which I fully agree with. It's shaky, the grains of sand are too large, but creating this test and continuing with subsequent visual testing helped me come up with a feasible storyline and gave me room to explore different styles. For this film, I made this background track, but moving forward, I do plan to work with a musician friend of mine for the final film sound piece. So I'll be quiet here for a second so you can hear it. So you never really reach a visual conclusion. I'd like to fix that going forward. I learned a lot of things from this and that I could improve on going forward, from the stability of the camera to the number of frames per motion depicted. Working on that really helped. I wanted to show some stills from different scenes I shot. So you can see the further I got, the arguably more immersive and consistent set design and lighting got. I also started with a basic story idea, but the further I went with tests, the more locked into ideas I got. That leads me to the topic of iterative practice. It's a fundamental component of my process in this project. Through trial and error testing, I'm able to see the viability of certain visual approaches that could be useful in the final film. There's a little behind the scenes.
Okay. This is test number 36.
I kind of just kept coming up with new tests to give myself, thinking this could be something that I encounter and want to portray in the final film. This one was a stationary object with a moving light. I really tried to have fun with them. This one was plexiglass and shooting light from below instead of above. I wanted to see what a translucent surface would look like with the car driving on it, as well as playing with kind of geometric shapes. And then more recently, I've been trying to do sound tests with the musician I'm working with. This was also a first test in the full-size cars that we're working on. It's short. Influences. There are quite a few behind the making of this short film. In film, we often see cars realistically driven or exaggeratedly driven, and sometimes cartoonishly personified. For instance, in the Pixar's Cars film franchise. While I do love realism and extreme driving stunts, I would like to avoid cartoonish personification. Instead, I plan to give my vehicles character through their driving mannerisms, reactions to obstacles encountered, as well as dramatic lighting and symbolic color use. Early stop-motion practitioners brought their childhood fantasies to life in the form of giant monsters. Take, for instance, King Kong 1933. Seeing these early films' use of in-camera special effects rather than post-production speaks to me. There is a truth about a fire that was photographed on set. It cannot be reproduced exactly in post, such as the burning roller coaster in The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. where the magic is all captured through splicing separate shots together. I let these curiosities I encounter in film research drive my own research and practice. Testing what I can produce in camera is essential to me before locking into a story I might not be able to depict. Seeing what works, does not work, and what has potential for iterative practice guides me in building the framework for an achievable final story. My technical approach is inspired by many of these early practitioners, and I have a very big sweet spot for Ray Harryhausen's work. A lot of my visual inspiration, and specifically set design, has come from more contemporary stop motion examples. Twilight Zone's surreal or uncanny valley type of emotive undertone is a perpetual point of reference for me. That leads me into the fact that the Twilight Zone also provides me with an excellent example of well-done sound design. But it's not the only one I favor on this list. The other film by its side, Seth Ickerman's Turbo Killer, shows phenomenal music synchronization to many different animation styles. I will admit I'm a bit biased on that one because I love synthesizers. But we can't forget Stephen King's Christine film either, as it is a fantastic example of music scores adding to the emotive range of a given scene. Moving to vehicle driving characteristic influences for my film, Christine also offers a lot of surreal automotive imagery I find beauty in. The scene of the car driving on fire inspired me directly in attempting to depict something similar in my test film. Small nods to past works influential to this film are something I aspire to incorporate into the final piece. These other sources are highly influential to how I want my driving characteristics to look on screen as well. Particularly rally driver Colin McRae, whose style of driving favored aesthetic cornering and showmanship over safety and concern for bodily harm. And Keiichi Tsuchiya's Plus-B film that introduced the world to drifting as an alternative to straight line cornering. I've also referenced many broad animation and more stop motion specific resources to aid in educating me in areas where I'm a bit more lacking knowledge as a photo major and not an animated arts major. These are a couple of the sources I've found quite useful. As I mentioned prior, this book here by Ray Harryhausen, it shows some of the magic behind the scenes, and I've gotten a lot of joy out of that one. So getting to tools and timelines and the nitty-gritty. For the shooting, I plan on utilizing prior experience in photography, studio lighting, and various related processing softwares. Additionally, using this project as motivation to learn Dragon Frame 5 software, while also further exploring set design and motion depiction. This will be a film shot entirely on digital full-frame cameras, utilizing hot lights in my basement, with possible room for exploring the school's animation equipment along the way. I'll be creating the set using a mixture of ready-made objects such as model cars, found objects, twigs and dead tree limbs, and sculpted objects, clay for hills, wooden wire for underpinning and scaffolding. I'm leaving myself a lot of time for the first set building, which is the crossroads. I plan to make this one the largest and most detailed desert set in the film. Other sets built for scenes before and between the crossroads will be less varied and more reusable with mild modification, similar to how I repeated landscape elements in my test film. The model cars are 1/24th scale and are planned to house Evan Design 5mm LEDs in order to replicate head and taillights. There will additionally be stop motion clips of steering wheels and gear shifting as if it's doing it on its own. And these I plan to shoot in real life, similar era, same model cars as the model ones I'm using for the film. I've conducted initial tests in this style of shot, which leads me to anticipating these interior clips being shot more rapidly as no set fabrication is needed, just patience for varied lighting approach. Sound design will be a collaborative process over the course of the summer with musician Quinn Bentley. Audio will be produced through the Ableton 11 software. I originally wanted to do it all myself, music included. However, I realized I'm already juggling so many roles with this project, it could alternatively be a great chance to practice collaboration instead for the sound aspect of the project. As well as I find it to be a great way to incorporate the person who first taught me stop motion basics, over a decade ago into me reinvestigating the medium today. So here is my current working timeline. It is subject to change, but I am trying to get as much pre-production as I can shortly after the semester ends here, so that I'm able to make use of the summer months. I'm very thankful to have the summer because I think I would radically have to tone down this project if I had to start it in the fall and present it in the spring. I think research is going to be a fundamental thing for me in every step along the way, as I am doing a lot of firsts for myself and trying to make a well-polished animation. I think it's important to just keep researching when I encounter obstacles along the way. Through researching successful historic examples of stop motion immersion in film, I aspire to learn tools and approaches I can use to create an engaging stop motion viewer experience. Using the vehicle characteristics and journey portrayed, I hope to lead the viewer to see this film as pertaining to the human experience of committing to a decision of one's own choosing. Thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate it. I'd like to open up the floor for questions.
Thank you. That was great. This is exciting. I had a question a little bit about the story. You mentioned that this is going to be sort of a story about like avoidance and confrontation and decision making. And I'm wondering, in the storyboarding process, the characters within your film, are you sort of creating a backstory for them, more of a reasoning of this confrontation, of this avoidance, why that's happening?
I really want it to be more general so that people can actually relate to it better. I don't want them to know why these cars are in the desert, where the end destination is. It's just more so focused on the journey itself and from like a symbolic standpoint, I guess.
I would encourage, maybe sometimes it helps even for ourselves to create a little bit more of a story. It doesn't necessarily have to come through, but sometimes it can help with some of the decision-making processes as you go through it, of like why you made this car red, or why this, these things that may not necessarily come to it. I would encourage you to maybe have some of that for yourself.
I appreciate that. Yeah. On that, continuing that note though, I will say one thing I do want the audience to question is the role of the chasing car, and if it's pushing it onto the right path or the wrong path. Eventually it will be the right path, it'll be back to the crossroads. But I want that to be something in their mind, possibly questioning how that first car ended up stuck in the desert.
I'm curious about like the aesthetics of the piece and how much it's important to you that the fabrication of the set is revealed, that we're looking at, toy cars on sand with twigs and rocks, or if you would rather, if you're aiming for something more polished where it looks like an actual special effect and we're meant to believe that this is a real car in a real landscape. So is it,
I feel like I'm
to like what spectrum you're on there.
I feel like I'm trying to find a happy medium. I think a little bit of stylization is not a problem, but I would like people to see it in a more realistic sense. That's kind of why I'm taking a lot of focus on how I portray the motion of the cars going forward and that kind of thing. I'd like people to see it as maybe realistic driving mechanics and situations, but not the most realistic visual atmosphere. It's more of a stylized visual, but realistic physics, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I put a bit more thought into it for sure.
I also realized that, you came into PNCA, so you have 10 more minutes on your Zoom.
I'm not upgrading right now.
You came into PNCA making images of cars. I remember that very well. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit to your your personal interesting parts, because I don't know if that fully came through in your presentation, and I think that would
Yeah.
maybe help your audience who isn't aware of that.
Well, before I came to PNCA, my first professor at the Art Institute, he was the trackside photographer at PIR for 7 years, and he always really like encouraged me to test out my photo skills at car meets and that kind of thing. So it's a good muse and a good proving ground for getting better behind the camera. I kind of carried that with me coming here, and I feel like part of me doing this is kind of because I've been clashed a bit more here for taking pictures of cars. It's kind of in the arts here. I remember scanning picture I took a long time composing on 35mm in the DPS, and won't say who, but a professor came up and said, "Oh, cars again." And I gotta say, like, little bits like that just made me want to try and prove that I can use cars to make something artistic.
Good for you.
I love cars and I love stop motion. And I'm just curious about how you're gonna handle the sand. You said when you thought your sand grains were too big, but, and the sand animation is really good. So I'm sure I thought you were working with it in here. How do you plan to do that?
Well, I've been looking into different diorama sands. This project has given me the first excuse to go into a hobby store in a long time. I've already been finding a lot of materials that I wish I had known about before building the test film set, such as just using textured pieces of paper that are colored in the sand color scheme. And I'm planning to fix them to wood to be the actual road section, so it'll be hard and it won't be moving under the cars. Like maybe some of the environment surrounding the road to be loose sand, because I feel like it won't be driven over, so it won't have to resist that weight as much. I think it's going to be important to probably get a couple of different samples of sand before I lock into one for it. Yeah, that's been something at the top of my list for this.
I mean, some of the things I liked in there particularly were, I liked how the cars rode through the sand and that it made a mark. And then, but you also have some, are you gonna do it all on camera or are you gonna have to add anything?
I just started testing with green screen to do a night sky. I'd like to take the chance to videotape a couple of sunsets and see how I might be able to just use that for the background, the night sky background. Other than that, I can't say there's going to be a lot of external editing, but it does depend. Like, for instance, with the video clip here with the screen, putting my name as the director there, that was all done in Photoshop. And that was a test to see if I'd be able to do moving text like that in the film. And same thing with the tachometer needle, that was actually all done in Photoshop as well. So I think I will situationally like find a use to composite some things. In the back there.
In my experience, sound design is really hard to sort of the real function as a scraping the tires. Do you have the resources that have you looked at the getting very natural sound?
Actually, I thought someone might ask me that. I'm still debating the best way to gather audio samples for the simulating of the engines. I prefer not to rev the heck out of the real car's engines just for the sake of recording. One thing I've considered is pulling from old World Rally Championship footage, because they have a lot of the realistic audio you would hear driving on some of these surfaces, as well as the engine noises. Another option I've thought about is how in driving simulation games, they have excellent audio and you're able to produce the sound you would exactly want for, say, this, but my hesitation there is like not having a legal license to take these video games audio. For the audio test with my buddy's background song, that was audio pulled from a YouTube video, not something I'd like to do for the final film. But yeah, that's a big thing I'm still debating right now. Shows.
I'm just curious about your choices of vehicles that you're going to be using. Are you using Japanese and because it shows it's like a
Yeah.
Subaru and European? Are they?
I guess like one, I have access. I can actually shoot in full-size versions of these cars. Maybe not the exact same trim, but similar enough that it'll fool you in the final film. But another part of it is, I guess, the old versus new. One car is a little bit newer. It's also they're two different manufacturers. You have Porsche in Germany and you have Subaru in Japan, but they both use boxer engines. So it's like both a clash of similar engines and a clash of differing countries of origin and a clash of age. So I just thought that was interesting.
One thing I love about Thesis projects is you all tend to go as artists and find what you love to do, like re-embracing the car and saying, this is what I'm doing. And I really love that. And I also love the fact that you're going back into your childhood, particularly the fact that you're collaborating with Clint. That's really exciting. And collaborating at all. I think that's really smart. It sounds like you're really thinking through many of the things that you need to worry about through the timing. The documentation that you did of your testing, I hope you will continue to document your process because it's marvelous, it's hilarious, it's informative, you can use it to get jobs. And I would like to urge you to think about doing an installation for your final project.
Interesting. I love that idea just because I had the thought the last week, maybe I can get the wiring done, just have one of the cars sitting here with the taillights and the headlights lit up, but it didn't quite work out. I think that would be awesome for the final experience to give audience members a bit of the scale it was all shot at.
And you can also, have films on the wall of you doing your process, or you can have it in a flat screen. I mean, there's so much you could share about this whole thing in addition to your film. So, yeah.
It's great food for thought.
And you might think about working with Ron on that. Make sure he can be a little help for you with this
Definitely.
project.
I have heard the name. I need to reach out for sure.
Just following up on some of what Linda's saying, have you considered taking, formal still photos to complement the moving image, or do you think you just want to restrict it to it being a moving film in the end?
I kind of want it to be taken as a moving film in the end, but I feel like it would be cool to have maybe a poster or something that represents it. Just kind of put a lot of energy into that still image. But yeah, it's a little bit up in the air still. I think I'm more so leaning on film for the final presentation.
Poster's also a lot of work. In a whole different brain place. Yeah, you might collaborate with a design student.
That could be good.
I might have missed this. I think you mentioned before that, really using your study of light and the different lighting techniques you've been learning. Could you just tell me a little bit more, because of this scale, I'm sure you're using like flashlights and small lights and creating your own sort of setups here on a miniature scale, or what do you?
A little bit. For the test film, I was using pretty much just two lights for it, and it was one main 400-watt light to produce a good amount of lighting, as well as a very small, cheap Amazon $30 cube light that had temperature control, just so I could add a little bit of kick to certain areas.
Yeah.
I have been thinking a lot about it in the last couple of weeks, and I'm thinking I'm probably going to need another one of those 400-watt lights just to do it right, but budget.